So we'll look at microbial farming, which basically means exactly what you may be thinking of. It's farming for microbes which can be added to the soil like fertilizer, but they will have a good effect on the quality of food, emissions, soil health, and of course productivity and so on, and symbiotic relations with other species around them. Plus, we also have looked at the problems with fertilizers in many ways. Fertilizer production takes up about 1.2% of the total energy consumption by the industrial sector around the world. And we have also looked at this emission diagram 100 times now, but we can never look at it too many times anyways. So depending on how we count, the agricultural, forestry and land use can take up or emit 18 to 25 or even 30% of the total emissions, as we have seen. And the pesticides and the fertilizers that are used have tremendous negative impacts on the environment, either through N2O emissions or adding too many nutrients to coastal waters, groundwaters, creating harmful algal blooms, pathogens, water quality problems, and so on and so forth. Plus, over time, you can also end up losing the efficacy of fertilizer application due to soil health degradation, which means you keep adding more and more. So the idea is to use natural biome in the soil to get the work done instead of just adding fertilizers and chemicals. So iron and manganese bacterial oxidizers in the mud of a fish pond. So that's a nice image. So soil, a spoonful of soil is supposed to be full of microbes that are maybe up to 10 billion in number, the most diverse species with maybe up to 80 or 90,000 different species in just a thimbleful of soil. Here is an image of a scientist sampling bacteria in the Amboseli National Park in Kenya. So the diversity of the soil microbes can be very large as well, depending on the vegetation, temperature, rainfalls, soil moisture, etc., etc. And again, empirical knowledge has existed for a while. Farmers have long mixed legume crops with non-legume crops to improve yield. So legumes like alfalfa, groundnuts or peanuts and soybean can be planted with corn, which is a non-legume. So legumes basically host bacteria that can provide nitrogen. Since most of these other plants cannot directly use nitrogen, they need nitrate, which is where we add that as fertilizer. But these nitrogen fixing bacteria hosted by these legumes can take dinitrogen and give us nitrate. This happens in the ocean as well. You have nitrogen fixers in the ocean as well. This nice review paper looks at the microbes and climate change, and it nicely points out that the current state is that we tend to sequence the soil microbiome to identify what is there and what their potential functions are. It's challenging to determine the functions beyond measurement of bulk scale processes such as soil respiration. How much do they contribute to soil respiration? Because we are always interested in conversion of soil organic matter into emissions like methane or carbon dioxide. Genes, proteins and metabolites involved in carbon and nutrient metabolic pathways are largely unknown. So we are focused so much on CO2 that we should look for desired outcome where there is a complex loop in which microbes are interacting with 1,000 other species. So we need to understand the molecular details of soil biogeochemical reactions that are responsible for cycling carbon and other nutrients, make better predictions of climate change impacts on metabolic pathways, which is slightly different a point of view than what we are focused here on coming attractions and drawdown, determines the metaphenome of the soil microbiome under different climate conditions. So here we are talking about feedbacks with climate and emissions and so on. So this is just another schematic talking about bacteria and extracellular polymer something or the other. Necromasses is dead material. Plant carbon sink, nodules, and this is some kind of enzyme that is symbiotic with the plant growth and so on. So this kind of understanding is needed because we need to know what the overall picture of the soil health and food production and climate change are. So we are looking at soil organic carbon being respired more, emitting CO2, or being sequestered. So permafrost, temperature increased CO2, fire perturbations, seawater intrusions because of groundwater mining, and increased precipitation because of climate change, and so on. They're all affecting soil microbiome in various ways, and including drought, and they are all affecting soil organic carbon, which is a close relation with soil microbiome. And soil organic carbon has a very close relation with the structure of the soil, its ability to hold water, and nutrient cycling, and so on. So microbial farming basically wants to go further than even the microbes now being used, where they are used to fight what are considered unwanted organisms like grasshoppers or aphids or some sort of fungi and so on. Whereas in the soil there is a whole system which is dependent on each other. So the idea is to get away from this targeted killing of different species without knowing their role in the whole microbiome and the symbiotic functioning of it, and how that affects soil health and plant health and crop productions, nutrient cycling, and so on. And of course emissions. So the microbial farming is to basically, let's say, produce nitrogen fixing bacteria for wheat. We don't know what it is yet, but research is on. So instead of going and buying fertilizer, can a farmer just go and buy a kilogram of microbes that he can come and then spray on his soil that will symbiotically make the soil healthier, food production better, reduce emissions, make it more drought tolerant, extreme events tolerant, temperature tolerant, and so on and so forth. So microbial farming is definitely coming attraction in that sense, to be a positive addition to what we have already talked about in terms of regenerative farming, conservative farming, tree intercropping, multi-strata agroforestry, and so on. So this is the next nice big step.